The rain was falling softly that evening, steady and cold, like it had been waiting for this moment. I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the gray sky while stirring the pot of soup that had already gone cold. Daniel was late again. He'd texted around 6:30. "Running late, big client tonight. Don't wait up, love you." That last part, love you, used to mean something, but lately it felt like punctuation. For the past 3 months, Daniel had been working late, more often than usual. He'd come home after midnight, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, his tie loosened, his voice soft and careful. When I'd ask how his day went, he'd smile, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. At first, I convinced myself it was stress, maybe new projects, more clients, a bigger workload. But the silence in our house had started to feel heavier. His laughter, once so easy, had disappeared. That night, something in my chest wouldn't let me rest. I felt it, a cold unease crawling under my skin. I checked the time, 9:47 p.m., then 10:12, still nothing. My hands were shaking when I picked up my phone. I opened the Find My Device app, the one we'd set up years ago for emergencies. My finger hovered over his name. A part of me screamed not to do it, but curiosity, fear, and heartbreak were stronger. When the map loaded, my world stopped. Daniel's phone was not at the office. It wasn't even close. The blue dot blinked steadily on a quiet street in the suburbs, Willow Lane. I zoomed in. The address popped up, 14 Willow Lane. My pulse raced. I knew every one of Daniel's listings. I handled some of his paperwork myself, but I had never seen that address before. The first thought was denial. Maybe he was showing a house, maybe a late-night client emergency. But it was 10:30 p.m. Who looks at property at that hour? The app showed he'd been there for over an hour. I grabbed my coat, keys, and left. The rain had turned heavier, drumming on the windshield as I drove through empty streets. The wipers thudded back and forth, but my vision kept blurring, not from the rain, but from the tears I refused to let fall. When I reached Willow Lane, I parked 2 houses away. The neighborhood was quiet. Neat driveways, trimmed lawns, small houses glowing with warm yellow light. And then I saw it. His car, our silver sedan. It sat parked neatly in the driveway of that house, just like it belonged there. My breath hitched as I stared at the front window. Through the half-drawn curtains, I could see light flickering from a TV. 2 shadows moved inside, a man and a woman. The man laughed. His silhouette was unmistakable. My husband. The woman stepped closer, her figure slim and elegant. She reached out, placed a hand on his chest. He didn't pull away. He leaned in. The world blurred. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the sound that wanted to escape. A sob, a scream. I didn't even know. They were drinking wine. She touched his face. He smiled. The same smile he used to give me. My entire body went cold. I don't know how long I sat there, staring through the window, shaking uncontrollably. It felt like time had stopped. The rain on the windshield distorted everything, like a cruel filter. When I finally drove away, it was almost midnight. The road back home felt endless. I kept replaying every moment in my head. The lies, the late nights, the sudden secrecy. It all made sense now. He wasn't working late, he was with her. When Daniel came home the next morning, he looked exhausted but cheerful. "You're up early," he said, dropping his keys on the table. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep." He kissed my forehead. I flinched, just slightly. He didn't notice. He went on about his late client, about how tough the negotiation had been. I nodded and pretended to listen, though every word felt like poison. For the next few days, I acted normal. Cooked breakfast, smiled when he came home, asked about work. I even laughed at his jokes. But underneath it all, I was planning. I wasn't going to confront him without proof. If I had learned anything from heartbreak stories, it was that cheaters lie best when cornered. So I followed him, quietly. Every late meeting became a data point. Every GPS ping, a breadcrumb. He went to Willow Lane 3 times that week, always between 8 and midnight. By the 4th day, I hired someone, a private investigator named Claire. She was sharp, discreet, and used to dealing with unfaithful spouses. Within 4 days, she had photos. Daniel and the woman, her name was Sophie, together in restaurants, in parking lots, and once walking hand in hand near that same white house on Willow Lane. When Claire handed me the file, I thanked her. Then I went home, locked the bedroom door, and opened the envelope. The first photo showed them together in his car. He was smiling, she was laughing. By the 5th photo, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. The man I had loved for 12 years, the man I built a home with, was building another life behind my back. I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then I stopped. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at him and realized something had shifted. The love I'd felt was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. I wanted him to feel what I felt. So I started planning my revenge. The next morning, Daniel left for work as if nothing had happened. I watched him from the doorway, his briefcase in hand, his coat brushing his shoulders. He smiled at me, a practiced, casual smile, and kissed my cheek. I forced myself to smile back, though my stomach churned with anger and disbelief. The day dragged. I moved through our home like a ghost, making coffee, tidying the living room. But my mind replayed the image of him with Sophie. Her laugh, the way she leaned into him, the way he smiled at her like I didn't exist. By noon, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him blind. I needed proof, irrefutable, undeniable proof. I called Claire, the private investigator I had hired a week earlier. "Anything new?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yes," Claire said. "I have more than photos. I've tracked Daniel's phone for the past week. Every time he claims he's working late, he's with Sophie. Restaurants, a hotel on the edge of town, the White House on Willow Lane, all the same story. I even captured him sneaking out after midnight, heading straight to the motel. I felt a wave of cold satisfaction. Finally, the truth was out. That night, Daniel came home late, claiming a last-minute meeting with a client. I smiled and asked him to have dinner. He didn't question my calmness. He didn't know I had the evidence, that I knew every lie, every secret move he had made. After dinner, I excused myself to the bedroom and opened the file Claire had given me. The photos were damning. Him laughing with Sophie in his car, holding hands, entering and leaving her apartment. There were receipts, hotel invoices, and even messages that made my stomach turn. I cried again, but this time it was different. This was the kind of crying that purges the soul. Anger replaced sadness. Betrayal transformed into focus. I knew what I had to do. Over the next weeks, things escalated. I confronted him about finances, hidden transfers, secret accounts. I demanded transparency. He faltered, stumbled through lies, eventually admitting to moving money into a separate account. I felt empowered. The fear, the heartbreak, the pain, it all transformed into clarity. I had seen the betrayal and chosen to confront it logically without losing myself. Sophie eventually moved on, not because of me directly, but because Daniel's lies became too obvious, too heavy to sustain. He lost confidence, began avoiding her calls. Daniel and I had conversations, long, painful ones. I didn't forgive him immediately. I didn't pretend the betrayal didn't hurt. But I realized something vital. I had control over my life, over my decisions, and over my future. The weeks that followed were a mixture of tension, observation, and quiet determination. Daniel seemed on edge, sensing that something had changed, but not fully understanding the extent. I had learned to move carefully, every word, every action, measured. I was no longer the unsuspecting wife. I had become an observer, a strategist, a woman reclaiming her life. I continued gathering evidence, documenting everything, emails, messages, calls, even the small details he overlooked, receipts, unexplained purchases, photos of him leaving Sophie's apartment. All of it built a complete picture of the life he had been hiding. The turning point came one Saturday morning. I had a meeting scheduled with Claire, the private investigator, to review everything. When I opened the envelope she handed me, I realized just how deep his betrayal ran. He had been diverting not only his time, but also finances. There were hidden accounts, secret investments, and even property in her name. It was an empire built on deception. I looked at the photos. Daniel and Sophie in restaurants, hotels, coffee shops. Each image fueled a growing fire within me. But unlike before, I didn't feel the paralyzing pain. I felt control. I felt clarity. That evening, I confronted Daniel again. He returned from work exhausted, expecting the usual evening, dinner, small talk, and me pretending everything was fine. Instead, I greeted him with a calm smile, handed him the stack of evidence, and watched as recognition, fear, and guilt washed over his face. "This is everything, Daniel," I said quietly. "Your lies, your betrayal, every secret you thought you hid, now you have to answer." He stumbled through explanations, excuses, even denials, but the proof was undeniable. For the first time, he realized that manipulation alone could no longer protect him. I made mistakes," he whispered, his voice trembling. "But I still love you." I shook my head. Love is not about hiding your life from someone, Daniel. Love doesn't come with deception and lies. The confrontation was just the beginning. Over the next month, I took legal steps to ensure accountability. I met with attorneys, documenting everything, preparing for what was necessary to protect myself and any shared assets. It wasn't revenge in a petty sense. It was justice, and it was strategic. At the same time, I started rebuilding my own life. I reconnected with old friends, started attending evening classes I had postponed for years, and even took up running again. Every step, every small victory was a reminder that I had power beyond the confines of my marriage. Daniel tried to plead, to negotiate, even to manipulate me emotionally, but I no longer gave him that leverage. I was firm, unyielding, and clear. He had to face the consequences of his actions, and I would not let him take me down with him. Sophie eventually faded from the picture. Without Daniel's commitment, she lost interest, and her occasional messages went unanswered. I felt no satisfaction in her absence, only relief. The true transformation, however, came within me. I realized that betrayal, while devastating, had also awakened something I had neglected for years. My own strength, my voice, my clarity of purpose. I no longer sought validation from someone who could not be honest with me. I no longer measured my worth by his approval. I defined myself on my own terms. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the rain drizzle softly against the glass. It reminded me of the night I had discovered the betrayal, of the shock, the anger, the heartbreak. But this time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt liberated. I had turned a moment of immense pain into a catalyst for growth, for self-assertion, for freedom. Daniel by now had moved out temporarily. The house felt different, quieter, lighter. I still felt the echoes of what had happened, but they no longer controlled me. Every room, every corner, was now a place I could reclaim as my own. Weeks passed. We met a few more times to finalize the separation legally. He apologized, genuinely this time, or at least as much as he was capable of. I listened, nodded, but I felt nothing but resolve. This was not about forgiveness yet. This was about finality. I started traveling again, something I had always loved but put aside for domestic life. Small trips at first, weekend getaways to nearby towns, quiet retreats to focus on writing and reflection. Each journey reminded me that my world was bigger than the life I had known, bigger than the deception that had nearly consumed me. Months later, I opened a letter from my attorney. The settlement was complete. Assets were divided fairly. Daniel would continue his life, but separately. And I had full autonomy. The weight of secrecy, betrayal, and manipulation had been lifted. It was a turning point. I celebrated not with grand gestures, but with quiet reflection. I went to my favorite coffee shop, sat by the window, and watched the world move on. People walked by, unaware of the storm I had survived, the betrayal I had witnessed, the empowerment I had cultivated. And I smiled, because I had emerged stronger, wiser, and entirely my own. The memory of Daniel's betrayal never fully faded, nor did it need to. It had been the crucible through which I discovered my own resilience. I understood that betrayal, while painful, can also illuminate paths previously unseen, paths toward self-realization, independence, and clarity. I began writing again. Short stories, journal entries, reflections on resilience and self-discovery. Each word, each sentence, a testament to survival, a reminder that pain can be transformed into power. And one night, I looked at the empty seat beside me, the house quiet, the rain gently tapping against the glass, and I whispered to myself, "I am free. I am whole. I am stronger than I ever knew." It was the final truth. The journey from heartbreak to empowerment was complete. I had faced deception, uncovered the truth, confronted it with strength, and emerged on the other side with my dignity intact. No more lies, no more secrets, no more betrayal, only clarity, only self-respect, only life lived fully on my terms. And in that quiet moment, watching the rain, I realized something essential. Sometimes, the end of one story is the true beginning of another. Your own story, written by yourself, without compromise, without fear, and without regret. The house, once heavy with deceit and secrecy, now breathed with life and hope. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat in my favorite chair, and smiled. Life had given me a harsh lesson, but I had taken it and turned it into my strength. The night stretched on, peaceful, endless, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly, completely free.